Okay, I'm here today with Vic, and we're going to talk to Jesus if we can, or whoever else might have information to give to us as we continue to parse out the story of what happened to Jesus, what really happened. So, Vic, do you have questions?
I do. I do have some questions. So, Jesus, just kind of keeping it lighthearted for the first question. What is your favorite song about you that is out there that you love?
You're not going to give me that one, are you? Jesus loves me. This I know,
Uh,
because the Bible tells me so.
I love it. I love it. Beautiful. Okay, so Jesus, there's in the Bible, there's accounts of you casting out demons and driving out spirits. Were these what people would call thought form entities, or just people's innate craziness, or were there actual demons in these people, or what was this concept?
Understand, at that time, there was not a trust on demons occupying people. That is something that came along afterwards. And so I certainly wasn't casting out demons. What I was doing was sometimes I would place my hands on someone and I would say, trust on God today. Just trust on God and let all your troubles fall away. Because in that time, there were people who were very, very disturbed, just like there are today. And there were people who were so afraid of the voices they would hear and of the ideas in their head that would go round and round and round that they would become just about incapacitated. Today, you would call them bipolar or schizophrenic or something like that.
Hmm.
And so in my day, they were just crazy people. And sometimes they would lock them up somewhere or tie them down or do something like that to keep them from disturbing the peace. And so I just would lay my hands on them and say, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry about it because God is here and God can hear everything you say. And so just ask God to help you today. Just ask God to help you today and let all your fears fly away. Let all your fears go. And so maybe they interpreted that as demons. Let
Mm,
all your demons go.
mm,
But in that my day, it wasn't like there was this big trust on demonology, shall we say, or devils or demon worship or all of that kind of thing that people do today when they say, oh my God, these people are inhabited by the demons or they are involved in devil worship, etc. That wasn't something that happened in my day. However, there were still people that were very, very disturbed and they
okay,
were not treated very well for the most part. And so I had to quell their fears. And that's what I did.
okay, excellent. Gosh, I thought I had more questions for you, Jesus. Let me see here. Let me see here. Um, ooh, do you have any questions, Stephanie? Let's shoot it back to you. Maybe something will come to mind.
I'm going to get some. So, what have you got about to say about the people that wrote the Gospels? And I don't know too much about them. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John is the all I remember from my religious training. Roasted pigs, Steph. That's what we say today when we talk about people who are roasted over the spit in order to make the story juicy.
Mm,
And so they did what they could to add a little bit of flair to the rumors and that had continued to flow even after I was long gone. The rumors continued to flow because, as we talked about when we talked yesterday, there was so much going on in that day. There were so many different factions. And the day that I was crucified, there was so much of this toxic brew that was bubbling up because, as you know, there were different times when the Jews would rebel. And it was after the rebellion that happened during the time of Hadrian that people really began to pay attention to this old story because they needed, what should we call it? They needed a flag to fly overhead to support their trust on their own ability to define their own capacity to live free. And so they remembered the story of how I was crucified that day and how much it came out about the lies that were told, because, of course, after you're dead, then people will admit they lied because by then you've already fried and they don't have to worry about it anymore. And so by that time, there were a lot of stories going around about how they had forced the hand of the governor, you see, to kill an innocent man
Hmm.
and how he hadn't stayed dead. So that added a air of mystery to it all. That maybe God didn't want him to be dead because they had overplayed their hand when they thought they were going to kill this man in order to prevent him from helping the Jews to overcome their captivity, you see. And they began to play in a different way. And that's about the time that Christianity really took hold. And people really began to say, hey, we need to play a different way. If this man Jesus was an innocent lamb that was killed to fulfill the agendas of the Jewish elite, then we don't want to have anything to do with the Jews. We don't want to have anything to do with them because they killed an innocent man just because he trusted on God above. And so that's when Christianity and Judaism really split.
Hmm.
And I won't say it was exactly, at a particular date or time, but that was the cause of the split. That it began to come out how the Sanhedrin and others had conspired to force the hand of the Romans to hang me from the nearest tree, so to speak. And so the Christians said, well, we don't want anything to do with you anymore because you killed an innocent man. And the Jews said, well, boo hoo, go away because you're not really going to save the day, are you? You're just going to all die like sheep to the slaughter because you trust on somebody that told you that God would take care of you. And so it was quite a mess again. And then there
Hmm.
were the ones who were kind of what we will call the Christian apologists who had to dig out the stories and reduce them to a written form so that people could all get on the same page, you might say.
Hmm.
Does this make sense to you today?
Yes. It's the cause of a lot of problems.
It caused a lot of problems, but it was bound to happen because everything that happens must happen. Because if it didn't need to happen, it wouldn't happen, you see. Can you trust on that reality?
Yes.
If you were to look at things the way God in heaven looks at things, you would say, well, everything has to happen that way because there has to be balance. There has to be balance. One thing leads to another, and this leads to another. And then everything that happens is real. You see, if the wind picks up, it had to happen that way because of all the things that put it in play.
Hmm.
And so it is the same with everything. If somebody says to you today, I hate you, and it hurts your feelings, then it is in play. You see, the wind is in play, and it will play out the way it has to, and maybe eventually it'll become a tornado and destroy your house, you see.
Okay. So Jesus, in some of the New Testament scriptures, you are quoted as saying that everyone should still keep the Old Testament law of the Jews and that no word will pass away until you come back again. Was there some truth in that statement, or was that made up?
A day ago, somebody said to me, they said, Jesus, did you ever tell the people that they would be free of mendacity? In other words, did I ever tell the people that they would be free of the trust on the body? And the answer is yes. I told them that as long as they trusted on God the Father, then they would be free. But as long as they trusted upon the laws of their fathers, that is to say, the ancient ways of the Judaism, or any other tradition, they would pass away. They would pass away because eventually they would come to see that reality has no end, you see, and the laws of mankind who trust on the body will pass away. They will pass away. Does this answer your question?
Yes. Um, okay, parables you taught about. There's a few famous ones out there. I'm thinking of a parable involving a sower sowing seed. Did you actually speak that one, or is that made up? Or what was your intention with that parable? A sower sowing into different soil.
Ramming the point home, ramming the point home was the way I looked at it because they were all farmers, you see.
Hmm.
And so it was a very good way to make them see that they would reap what they sow, that what you give, you shall receive, and they would pay for whatever they did. So, yes, I did use that illusion to wake them up to the reality of God energy, that just as you plant the seeds and reap the crops that grow, you don't plant a mustard seed and grow a fig tree, you see.
Hmm. Okay. Any other parables you want to set the record straight on? There's a lot of
Well,
misinterpretation.
nothing comes to mind at the moment, but if you have one particular that you want to ask me about, I can tell you because I probably said a whole lot of things that are not even recorded or remembered today. I'm sure I
Hmm.
did. And so it would be hard for me to say.
There was another parable where a group of women are keeping their candles, their oil lamps lit, and they're waiting for the a husband to come and take them to a banquet. Was that one that you had said? They're supposed to keep their oil lamps maintained, but some don't, and then they get lost.
There was something I said about the importance of keeping your lamp lit. Because if you don't keep your lamp lit, then others can't find you and they will walk right past you in the dark. But if you keep your lamp lit, then they can see that you are a reality in their world, you see? So I would say it this way: if the women keep their lamps lit by taking care of them, in other words, they don't let them go out one way or another by not mending the wick and the supply of oil or whatever they're using, which in some cases was fat in those days, there will be no way for them to be found when the time comes to take them to the banquet that God has prepared for them. So God has prepared a banquet for you. And he says to his children, come, it's time to share with each other all the gifts I have given to you. However, if you choose to hide your light or to let it go out because you're not being careful, then you will not be invited to the feast. That is my memory of what I said. How it has come out in the way others remember it, I cannot say.
Thank you. All right, and we've already covered the wedding where you did not turn water into wine, but instead found the wine. Um, Let me see. I can't think of
That was a
any.
good one.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm excited.
Remember, Vic, the next time you go to a party and you pull a bottle of wine out of your bag and say, hey, I just turned this bottle of water into wine, then maybe you will be the one they turn to in the future and they say, hey, we've got a problem here. If you can turn water into wine, could you help me there, Vic? Why don't you come over and take all my burdens off my shoulders for me?
I love it. So there's a lot of Catholics specifically out there that think you didn't have any brothers and sisters. Um, what say you to that, Jesus?
No, that's not true. I had quite a few, and they were younger than me. However, they were half brethren, you see. And so I never bothered to tell them that I had a new point of view. I just went away and began to preach or teach, as I think of it, not preach, the ones that I would encounter who would listen. And so they were kind of left alone to figure it out on their own. And so it wasn't like they were a procession that ran after me, you see. And so probably a lot of people were not familiar with my family origins.
Hmm, okay. Um, Jesus, I really don't have a lot of questions for you.
I have a question. So you had these brothers or sisters who were, typical Jewish family, and then you were the anomaly because you had those blue eyes and different coloring. How did it work with you and your siblings growing up? They were used to me, of course, so they didn't have much to say about the way I looked. However, they did not play in the same way that I did. because they just trusted on the sins of the fathers, you might say. In other words, sins are the ways that you miss the mark, you say, and so you don't get a clue about what's real because you just trust on the falsehoods that are told to you. So they trusted on the typical life of a Jew in that day and age, which I could not do because I just couldn't. There was something inside of me that would say, hey, this can't be true. This can't be true. This can't be true because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Why would we do that? It doesn't make sense. So they were closer to each other than they were to me.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
have another question. So
Go
you
ahead.
say that Mary's relationship with Joseph was not consummated until after you were born. Was there a wedding ceremony before you were born? Mary and Joseph were officially married. However, Joseph was aware that she was pregnant and he refused to have intimate relationships with her until after the baby was born because in those days there was a lot of confusion about the nature of the DNA and how it would play out and what would happen and all of those things. They only knew that a man and woman, when they got together, would have a child, but they didn't know all the ins and outs. You know, it's kind of like the myths that would grow up that if you ate rhubarb, your baby would have a birthmark, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So he just refused to consummate the marriage until after the baby was born, and then they had their own children together.
Okay. So I'm kind of astounded that so much is actually almost right in the Bible. Like it's very interesting because you've been able to confirm a lot of things. But Jesus, I want to know from all of your lifetimes, what is your favorite food?
Whoa, let me think about that one. My favorite food has to be the baseline reality here, Vic. I think I like to eat sweet.
Mm,
I like sugar. And so I don't know how I did grow that way, but I think a lot of us have because we all have an addiction to sugar, don't we? Because we all like what is sweet. And sugar is the epitome of the feeling you get when you get a little bit high when someone says, aren't you sweet?
oh, nice. Hmm. Stephanie, any questions?
Um, well, let's see. So I have the questions. Well, I have some questions. Are you willing to tell us about other lives you had? Yes. Can you tell us what? I don't know if you heard this Vic in the last one, but he told me he was a carpenter back in the day of the Anunnaki.
Oh, I did not hear
It's
that.
funny. He was the head carpenter. He was the one that helped make the structures for the mines.
Oh,
Life in Wisconsin. I had a life in Wisconsin here recently. It wasn't that long ago. and I died as a small child, and I had to go back to heaven and say, hey, I hardly lived a single day. And then they threw me away because they said, hey, it wasn't a real kid because he died before we really got to know him, you see. And so it's not a reality. So I got to tell all you people out there that every body is entrusted with a soul energy. And so that baby was me. And so when they said, well, it wasn't really a true human because he only lived a day, or they're born dead, like Stephanie's baby was born due to a knot in the umbilical cord that caused her to suffocate, still associated with a soul. And so what they don't know is the baby that died in a day was Jesus, you see. So we're all connected.
Mm.
We're all connected in the way we play on earth. And the fact that I was Jesus doesn't mean that I couldn't be someone simple, you see, who you wouldn't even pay attention to, the bum on the street, the one who's sitting there, the stranger at your door that you turn away, the baby that you say, well, he didn't live a day, so he's not that important. The way we play on earth is to say, hey, I'm no better than you. I'm no better than you. I don't care if you live a day or 100 years. It doesn't make you better than me. It doesn't make you better than me. It doesn't make you better than me if you could see reality. However, people think that the body is the key to their reality. The body is not the key to your reality. The body is the key to your experience of reality. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
So, Steph does know that I was the great grandfather of Mozart, that you know, who was the great composer.
Mm.
And my name was Mozart too. And I knew Steph in that day because she had a part to play in the way that she was just a simple girl who wanted to live a simple life. And instead, she was forced to be a sort of prostitute in the royal court of the day. They called them the courtesans or whatever. They were just high class prostitutes, is what they were. And one day, I came there to play because I was a musician in that day as well. And we began to talk. And I told her, I said, you don't have to do what they tell you to. If you're unhappy, then talk to God and He'll tell you what to do. And so she did. And she ended up dying, you see. And she was only about, I think you were about 20 years old. And she drowned herself in the river, you see,
Mm.
because she didn't want to be soiled in the trust on the infamous French royalty that caused so much pain and suffering to the people that eventually they would revolt and they would create a bloodbath because they had bathed in the hatred, you see, that was given to them as the only trust that they could see on life. That life was worthless. And the only lives that mattered were the ones that were so full of hatred that they could kill another. And so everyone wanted to be the one that could kill the others. And eventually, the ones that killed the others were the ones that got killed. And that's the way it did play out in that day. And I had a few other lives in between that lifetime with Steph when we did meet in Paris one day. And she did say, "You seem like a very nice man." And I have to tell you that I hate it here. I hate being here and I want to go home to my father, you see, who taught me how to paint when I was a little girl. And I want to be an artist, you see, but they won't let me be an artist because I'm a woman. And my brothers can paint, but I can't. I had to come here and be mauled by these obnoxious old men, you see. And that was the day that she had to say, "I can no longer play this way. I would rather be dead than be spread in front of these cruel beasts that think they are the ones who get to use you for their feast on being the least respectable people on the face of the earth. And yet they trust on the church and they trust that God is there and that Jesus is their Savior, you see. He'll save them because they can just go to Jesus and say, "Hey, take away my sins today and carry them on your own shoulders," because that's what you're there for, right? You're there to be the beast of burden so that we can unburden ourselves of all our hatred on this poor girl who only wants to be living in the simple countryside where she grew up, you see.
Hmm. Okay. So Jesus, do you know what age, with a developing child that it can receive a soul? Is it 3 months or at conception or what?
Decision is made before the pregnancy begins. In other words, by the moment that the egg is fertilized, there is already a soul attached to that developing individual.
Okay,
You generally know ahead of time that they're going to be coming into that family.
excellent.
However, it's not necessary that the soul be encapsulated in the physical form until it gives up its trust on heaven, you see. So small children are still able to go back and forth. They have not given up their trust on God, and they've not given up their trust on heaven, and they've also not given up their trust on telepathy. So you can still talk to them, you see, and
Hmm.
they will still call out to heaven and say, "Here I am, and I'm kind of sad. Could you help me so I don't feel so bad?" And that someone from heaven will try to soothe them, you see.
Okay, very nice. Well, let's talk about Revelation, the last book of the Bible, where you are going to come back with fire and brimstone. I don't think this is going to happen, but others do. What do you say?
I say, guess what, people? I'm here. And you can hear me just fine if you open your ears and clean the wax out and pay your tax to the governmental entity that taxes you and pay your trust to God, you see, because God is the only reality and He doesn't care whether you pay your tax to the king or not. He just says, sing your own tune, buddy. Sing your own tune, lady. And don't worry because I got your back. I got your back. And no matter what they do to you, if you are true to me, then I am true to you. So if I told you that this was the second coming, that you're part of the second coming because you're here talking to me, what would you say, Vic?
I'd say amazing. Welcome. Welcome back.
So, so where's the fire and brimstone? I'll tell you what, fire and brimstone is coming, but it's not me bringing it. It is the trust on mendacity that you're just a body and you can rape your Mother Earth and never have to pay for it, you see. So trust on the fire and brimstone. You've already seen a few fires recently that were a little more than typically, and you're going to see more until you learn to open the door to heaven, you see, and stop being so danged stubborn that you want to hold on to a story that is so gory that it would make a child puke and unless and yet you cram it down their throat and you say, this is the story of Jesus today, honey. And Jesus will bear your sins for you because Jesus was the only Son of God. And we killed him, you see, when we put him up on a cross. But it wasn't me that killed him because I would never do anything as bad as that. I'll just kill your spirit, you see, with this stupid story.
Mm,
So, yes, you could say the fire and brimstone is coming. And it was foretold because the people of old could see that the people could not listen to logic and they could not listen to reason, and they would destroy their own reality when they threw a child into a volcano, you see, in order to appease the gods. They were making the gods angry, and the gods would eventually come after them.
mm, okay. So, Jesus, did you have scars on your body after your NDE from where they hung you on the cross, where they nailed India?
Yes. They were painful for a while, but they eventually healed. I had help from others who put some antibiotic type of cream on them that
Mm,
they had used at that time because they knew the properties of certain plants that would assist in healing and prevent the growth of bacteria that would be harmful.
okay. Stephanie, any questions spurred with you?
A lot of my questions have to do with the how the what happened between the time that Jesus left the area and the rise of Christianity and the uh, Constantine, the Council of Nicaea, when they decided what would how they would take over Christianity and destroy its integrity. So I always think of that as the greatest corporate takeover of all time.
Hmm.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Jesus? Cast of characters, Steph. You knew some of them because, of course, what happens is that these people come back to play their parts over and over and over again because we tend to play the parts that spell our doom, you might say. And so some of the people that were involved in what you call the greatest corporate takeover of all time were people you knew. And one of them is very familiar to you because he has a part to play in this story that is so profound that he has come to ground himself in your heart, you see? So you're talking about Steve, right? Yep. So he was John the Baptist. So who else was he? Raised the worst emperor that the world had ever seen. You're talking about his life as Marcus Aurelius, and his son was, I can't remember what his son's name was, but my God, it wasn't Caligula.
Was
Was
it
it
Nero?
Caligula? No, it wasn't Nero. He was the, he was horrible. I understand. So, how did that happen? So, did that have to do with the persecution of the Christians and stuff? Yes. He was brutal and he was so cruel that he would trust on his ability to drive his sword through the heart of a man who would be hobbled, you see, so he couldn't run away. So he could play gladiator, you see. Oof,
Hmm.
God.
Was this Steve or Steve's son?
Steve's son. Steve was Marcus Aurelius. His son was emperor after him, and it was awful. I think Caligula was earlier. So
He
how
had
do you say it? Commodus?
Commodus?
Commodus.
Commodus. He apparently became emperor when he was 18.
So was that Steve's last life in this whole thing in the Roman story? He went from being John the Baptist to being Marcus Aurelius. Quite, quite certain that he had other parts to play in this story, Steph. However, as you know, he was there in the story that we talked about in Paris, and he had control of you because he was your guardian, you see. And when you died, he recovered his trust on being the one who would stand up and say, hey, we're not going to bow to the Pope today. And of course, he ended up being a rebel and getting in trouble and eventually being hanged. So he's had a lot of lifetimes of being hanged and beheaded and drinking poison and etc. But did he have any more parts to play in, the time of Constantine and the Council of Nicaea? No, not directly. He left a legacy of trust on God energy when he went away. However, his son was gruesome because he was the toothsome man you know today. Oh, God. No way. Yes, way. You're kidding. Donald Trump? Oh, my God.
So Emperor Commodus is Donald Trump.
Yes, is what I'm getting. He was also around in another story longer ago, but he's never played a good part. Does that guy not play good parts? Yes, of course he does. He had a part to play in the revolution of the colonies, where he was actually well respected and he saved the day. I won't say his name today because he also had to be executed, you see. And so he has played different parts where he has been in a trust on being the negative side of the computation, you might say. When people talk about trust on being positive, they don't understand that there has to be a balancing factor. So they're creating their own demise, you might say, because they create their own monsters. So you have to stop trusting on there being a big meter in the sky, and you can put all your desires on the positive side, and there's nothing to balance it. How can you balance the meter in the sky that says this is negative and this is positive when you put all your hopes and dreams in the positive side and you say, well, we got to be positive, we got to be positive people. You don't even know what negative and positive means. So you create the schemes that will make the vibrations that go back and forth. They go back and forth because there has to be balance, you see. And so if you want to have the best of everything, who gets the worst? Who gets the worst? And so if you want to defeat the ones who have to be the ones who are your worst enemy, then you need to open up your heart and say, hey, if there's a negative part to play, maybe I should do it today. Maybe I should play that part. And then God will say, thank you, honey, for being so willing to accept the leftovers, because the leftovers are really the banquet meal for those who trust on me being real. If you trust on me being real, then you don't say, hey, I'm better than you today because I'm the positive side and you're the negative side. You say, hey, I don't care what part I play. All I know is I love you. And if you love me too, then we'll do. But it's part of the karmic round, you see, that you have to go up and down. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, if you choose to play that way, eventually you're going to have to come to see that you're going to reap the benefit of the obnoxious brew that you created. So instead of saying, hey, I got to be positive today, why don't you just say, I love you today. I love the world today. I love you, God. This is the way we play. We just love each other and we don't have to give in to the hatred, you see. So the problem here that I see is that people have given in to the hatred because the hatred was there. It was there. If you trust on love and hate, and you say there's a big meter in the sky, and I'm going to be the loving one, and you trust on love and not on hate, then where does the hate go? However, if you say there is no hatred because God is a singularity and God is love, you see, and there's no opposite to God and no opposite to hate, I mean, no opposite to love, then there can never be any hate, you see. It would be nothing. It would just be an illusion. But if you trust on the illusion of hatred, then you will be an illusion. You see? So when you look on the people who trust on hatred for you and me, and you say, well, I hate you too because you hate me, then you are like the tiger chasing its tail. And you will chase its tail and chase its tail until it turns into butter, you see? And that's what's happening today. Is the tiger is chasing its tail and it's turning into butter. And eventually the butter will be recognizable to everybody because they'll say, hey, what happened to our world today? All the money in our banks has disappeared, and the food on the grocery shelf is very expensive, and we can't pay to live here anymore because all the tornadoes and hurricanes and stuff are destroying this place, and we can't get insurance. So we have to move now, and everything has turned to butter because you trusted on hate, you see? And eventually, the illusion of being smarter than God must fall away. Because when you trust on hate, you trust on being smarter than God.
Hmm.
Because what can be better than love, you see? What can be better than love? And if God is love and you trust on hate, then you must trust on being smarter than God, that you could figure it out, how to be smarter and better than God. So if God is love, you're going to be hate, so you can be better than God, you see? And that is just ridiculous. Just ridiculous. And it is the way people play because they say, I trust on God today, and I trust that I'm smarter than God because I hate the president in the office today because he didn't do what I want him to, which is to make me rich, you see. And so he must not be a good president. And because he's there, tells me that God must care because God let him wear his hair the way he wears his hair because everything that happens is true, you see? It's true. It had to be that way. It had to be that way. And those who don't think they're smarter than God will say, well, have a good day. Have a good day because I don't really care how the president wears his hair because what matters to me is that he is smart enough to say, hey, I'm not smarter than God today. I'm not smarter than God today. I'll just wear my hair the way I wear my hair, and you wear yours the way you wear yours. And if you want to vote against me, go ahead. If you want to vote for me, go ahead. If you want to impeach me, go ahead. That's up to you. But I'll still do what I do because I trust on God today. Does this make sense to you?
Yes.
And so my suggestion would be let Trump be whoever he is, but you don't have to use him the way you use me. You don't have to storm the Capitol and say, in Jesus' name, we're going to storm the Capitol today. You don't have to say, in Trump's name, we're going to ignore reality today. because you get to decide. You get to decide your trajectory. It has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with Trump, you see. But the reality is that you will reap what you sow. You will reap what you sow. And if you sow hatred, you will reap the results of what you did give to others, you see. If you say to others, well, I hate you today, and now I'm going to tell everybody how much I hate you, so they'll hate you too, then you become like the Sanhedrin and the people in my day who crucified me, you see. And you will have to pay because you will be nailed to that tree. You will be nailed to that tree, people, when you are picked up by the tornado or thrown around by the earthquake because you did not trust on love today. Love is simple. It's just to say, I see you today. I hear you today. Interesting. So, will you listen to me today? Will you hear me today? Will you see me today? Or will you run away? If you trust on love, you will sit still when someone from above comes to talk to you because I'm here. I'm here. I'm here to talk to you. This is why I'm here to talk to you. And if you want to talk to me like Vic does, then go ahead. We invite you. We invite you to come on this little podcast, you might say, and talk to us and ask your questions and tell us what you think. But if you are afraid to be heard and seen, then you trust on hate, you see. You trust that others will hate you because they'll say, hey, you're not playing the way Jesus told you to. You're not being a hypocrite the way that we say Jesus told us to play. And I say, grow up, people, grow up and get a life. And what I mean by that is to trust on life and not on death. Trust on me that I'm not hang and not don't hang me in effigy in your damn churches today. And I say damn churches because you have dammed up the energy of the people who want to be free because you told them that if they were free, God would punish them. And God doesn't punish you for being free. You punish yourself when you cage yourself in an illusory expectation of being the golden idol, that somehow you'll be better than your brethren and God will favor you. God does not favor the golden idol, you see. God's favor is for his children equally, and he will love them the way they love him. And if you are the child that turns away from God and says, well, God, I'm smarter than you, and I'm going to trust on hatred you see. I hate the president, or I hate this person, or I hate that person, I hate my boss. Then God will say, well, you're not much fun to play with, and you might as well go away and learn your lessons. And the ones who love me can stay with me, and we'll play together and be happy. And when you're ready to come back, I will welcome you with open arms. And this is the story, of course, of the prodigal son, you see?
Hmm. Okay. Very nice slip in there.
Huh?
I said nice slip in there.
Flip?
Slipped in that parable from the
Oh, yeah.
past. Well,
Any
I
other
don't
thoughts or questions?
I I think that's the mic drop moment from Jesus. I don't have anything that I can think of right off the top of my head. Anything else, Stephanie?
No. Well, thank you, Jesus, for coming and talking to us. Do you have any last words for us or anyone? Have you ever thought about this, Vic, that you had to overcome your own fears in order to be the one that hears me?
Yes.
And how do you feel about it?
I feel like there was a lot that had led up to this moment where I can get over all of my societal programming, but I'm glad that I'm here.
Well, I'm glad you're here too, because I had to get over my fears before you could hear me. And Steph knows this because we've been talking for years, and she would listen to me when I would tell her how discouraged I was. Because just like you, I'm human, you see, and I got discouraged and I was afraid to step out and say what I had to say because I was so worried about whether or not there would be anyone who could hear me or whether they just mock me. And they would mock Steph, of course, because she's a dear friend of mine. And when they mock us, it is like a thrust to the heart, you see? It is like hobbling your enemy, so to speak, and taking a sword and thrusting it through their heart. And so the day that I came to say, hey, I'm ready, Steph. I'm ready for a conversation with Vic because Vic is ready for a conversation with me. It was a synergy, you see, Vic. Do you understand that?
Yes.
You had to be ready, and I had to be ready because we were both climbing up the mountain, you see. But we were climbing up the mountain on other slopes, so we didn't see each other till we got to the top. And then we said, hey, Vic will talk to me today. He will know what questions to ask because he's thought about these things, and he will know that he had a part to play back in the day because we're friends, you see. But because we both got so inundated with all the dark energy from all the programming, as you say, it took many a day before we were ready to have this conversation, you see. But it was always in play. It was always in play because if it wasn't meant to be, it wouldn't be, you see.
Mm.
It wouldn't be a reality. And this is the best day of my life because I get to say, hey, thank you for taking the load away from me. Thank you for seeing me for who I am. Thank you for being my friend. And thank you for not standing there mocking me and saying you can't be the real Jesus because the real Jesus died. You see, the real Jesus died the day that the children lost their ability to play because they could no longer trust on reality because they had to be fed all that shit in their churches that would make them so afraid to talk to me because their mothers would punish them for talking to me. And of course, that's what happened to Stephanie. Her mother punished her for talking to me when she was a little girl. But it happens to so many children in their churches today where they force them to eat the shit. That's not good for them. And they take away the healthy meals. And they say, if Jesus comes to talk to you, it's not really him, dear, because Jesus died a long time ago. and Jesus can't talk to you. And even though we talk about the fact that he's in heaven, we still keep him on that cross in front of our churches. So you can be reminded that he's dead, you see, and he can't come and talk to you. And so thank you, Vic, for trusting on me because I'm happy today. It's the best day when I can say I have a friend. I have a friend in Vic today. Thank you for being my friend.
Anytime, old friend.